We'll try to fit this one in 45 minutes. So let's start with the beginning. Okay, we've got the outlines. Again, I'm ready to spend as much time on any of these issues. So the beginning is of course the genesis. And I mean, it's important to be reminded. I wanted of course to mention Babel before I mentioned Polyglossia. That's the quote of Genesis where they introduced the name Babel. That means something like, I think, confusion in the original Hebrew. So the quote runs, therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So it's quite ironic that that name was chosen for the multilingual support in text LuaTeX. It's of course very old. I think, I mean, the copyright at least dates back to, I think, 1989 in the different files. So it was all, I'd like to dismiss this stuff here. Sorry. So it was all fine and good. It did, well, it did render a very useful service to the community, and still does for all I know. There's nothing wrong with the state of Babel. However, in the meantime, so I gave you Genesis at first, and I'm giving you other books from the Old Testament as front titles. So in the meantime, XeTeX appeared, PDFTeX appeared, XeTeX appeared, LuaTeX appeared, and
and Johannes disappeared.
Sorry?
And Johannes, the original author of Babel, more or less disappeared.
Yes. That's what my second line name is.
Yes.
Shut up, Martin. So, yeah, I mean, the real issue with Babel arose, especially with the XeTeX, because Babel was really not very well suited to XeTeX. So when it started being really widely used, we had some kind of pickle. And at about the same time, in the middle of the years 2000, basically Johannes Brahms, the original author, not the composer, but Brahms with 2A, the original composer. Anyway, yeah, well, he did develop, Johannes did develop Babel for a very long time, and then he basically stopped doing any development, for which, I mean, nobody can blame him, but it's some kind of problem. So fortunately, about 5 years ago, a French guy called who was very interested in different languages, and I think he's basically a linguist actually. So he created Babel as a replacement for XeTeX, because that was the issue at the time. He did maintain it for a couple of years, introduced a lot of new languages. We had, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was something like 50 languages in Babel. He extended it with other languages that XeTeX supported much better than the original text. So by then, in 2008, we had over 70 languages defined, 71, 72. Well, at some point, we really didn't have any time anymore, so he handed maintenance over to me 1.5 years ago. And at that time, well, the same problem arose that we had with Babel and XeTeX. LuaTeX was becoming very widespread, and obviously people wanted to use something with LuaTeX, because neither Polyglossia nor Babel was very well adapted. So yeah, that was it. So I'm giving you something from the New Testament now. That's the book of Acts that introduced the event called of Pentecost. That's book 2. I'm glad you liked it. You know, when you find a good running joke, you just want to get it. So that's chapter 2, verse 4. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So I think in Christian theology it's really seen as the anti-Babel. So of course I don't want to call Polyglossia that. I don't want to call Polyglossia an anti-Babel. So rather I'd like to call the fact that Babel is now actively maintained again. I'd like to I like to mention that event as that's symmetrical of the creation of Babel at the end of the 80s. So the person maintaining it is Javier Besos from Madrid, or he's a Spaniard. I think he lives in Madrid. He was very active back in the time of Omega. He developed a few packages for Omega. So he's of course a very well-suited person to do that. And Babel is now maintained in the scope, well, in the spirit that had always been sorry, let's try that again. Babel is now maintaining the spirit that had always been there, which was, of course, to try to preserve maximum compatibility. And it's actually a huge package. The documentation alone is several hundreds of pages PDF. And since it is a core package of LaTeX distribution, it, of course, well, needs the spirit of the LaTeX team being what it is. They, of course, are loath to make any new changes, but at least we now have a maintainer, because, well, when Johannes started disappearing, we couldn't even fix obvious bugs or add some languages. That was very, very frustrating. So, well, when I was preparing the talk, the question I asked myself was really, what's Polyglossia doing now? And I think the first answer that we're ready in Polyglossia to actually add a lot of things and experiment. And maybe, God forbid, but we of course always break a little bit of compatibility by doing so, but otherwise you have no progress. So that's kind of the point where I'm at the moment. And yeah, that's the next one. So I started working on this working on LuaTeX support last summer. It wasn't completely finished. I stopped at some moment, and a couple of weeks ago I thought, okay, Tech Live 2013 is coming up, so we need something. So I now, well, it's complete, almost. And it's really, really coming up. I've got another person helping me at last. I wanted to be able to tell, of course, that this document would be the very first typeset with Polyglossia and LuaTeX, but since something is broken in the meantime, when I was working on it in the past couple of days, this is still typeset using XeTeX. And since I'm having that biblical analogy thing, I'm mentioning prophets in the text of my slide. So where are we at? Yeah, this is actually the most interesting part of the talk. Lamentation, in case you're wondering, is another book of the Bible, obviously. Well, it's in the Old Testament, but I had to put it here. So the interesting technical details. Sorry, lamentation refers to the things that are not yet addressed in the future requests. So the interesting technical details are about hyphenation patterns. In pre-LuaTeX LaTeX, as you will remember, we had to dump every pattern to the format. That was very big. So the thing that you see at startup that says Babel version 3 on something loaded with hyphenation pattern for Albanian, Amharic, blah blah, Czech, Polish, Slovak, Czech, Slovenian. That's because all these formats were dumped in all of these patterns were dumped into the format. It doesn't actually mean that Babel is loaded, by the way. So this is of course huge, because by now we have 70 different languages. We don't have as many different sets of patterns as all these languages, because some of these languages are not hyphenated at all. For other languages we're missing patterns because nobody has provided them. So I can't remember how much it is, but it's at least 30 or 40 different sets of patterns that are dumped into the format. And that's the price we have to pay if we want to be able to typeset all these different languages. But in LuaTeX, we don't have to pay that price. We can actually load patterns on demand. That's been introduced a couple of years ago. Well, it's really been there for a while, I can't remember, but at some point in the course of the development of LuaTeX, type, we did that. So that's of course very good. It's been, so for 3 years now, it's been possible to not actually dump any patterns at all in the format when building the different formats using LuaTeX as an engine. So they're not there. And you have to load them on demand. So obviously so one part of it is that when building format, the necessary care is taken so that the patterns aren't loaded. However, it means that when you run a tech document and for the packages that use the hyphenation patterns, you of course have to take that into account. So it's a little bit of code. It's really very nice, and now we can well, we can avoid that extra time at startup. So that's my first one. To the second one, that's a really funny one, and Moitza will remember something about it, I think. In the tech book, when in the chapters about hyphenation, Knut mentions as an optimization, as it were, that tech never hyphenates the first character in a paragraph.
Character?
First word. Did I word character? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm having so many.
That's why I was. You were leading us so saying it's funny, so it's like just waited how it's being done.
Sometimes it's character because sometimes well, I'm sorry, no, it's really never characters. But sometimes that's why I mentioned the issue we had. You have languages that don't use any visible space. That were also type, for example, is one such language, and so tag actually sees the first words, the first couple of words as a single word. So sometimes you have one paragraph seen as a word, but of course we never have the case of a word seen as a character. So okay, sorry for the confusion. And so the original tech, Knut's implementation, never hyphenates the first word in a paragraph as a rather obvious optimization. I mean, it's quite obvious that you wouldn't want to do that because, although, I mean, if your columns are so narrow, you're in a world of trouble. So tech doesn't do that. It's not really an issue, but sometimes it is. I actually show you something in my afternoon talk about why I want LuaTeX and XeTeX to do that. So yeah, because that early optimization of tech has been removed in LuaTeX, but has been retained in XeTeX, so we don't have the same. Again, it's a small issue. It's not as big as some of the other ones, but it's worth noting. So I'll tell you this afternoon why it's something that I really don't like that. Likewise, we have some LC codes issues. So the LC codes are, the lowercase code of the different characters that tech needs to know in order to know what characters are the upper and lowercase counterpart of each other. So that's set up in all tech formats. That's set up for all the ASCII characters. For the other characters, we need to do that ourselves at some point. We simply load a full list of letters saying these are the different characters. And obviously, LuaTeX and XeTeX still don't behave the same way. It's somewhat during format building, I don't know what it is. So, for the moment... sorry?
What exactly is the question about LC codes?
Oh, sorry, yes. It's the apostrophe. The letters of the alphabet, all the different letters used in the different languages are okay, but the Unicode apostrophe, so the one, that character here, that you see is the slanted glyph that you should use as a glyph, as the representative, the graphical representation of the character, but actually it has two different characters in Unicode. There's the old one, the ASCII one, hexadecimal code 0027, which is there and will always be there because that's the one you usually type when you type the apostrophe key on the code sign key on the keyboard. So that's what most documents contain. However, you have the other one well, it's a different Unicode character. It's number 2019, whatever, and this one isn't taken care of properly, which is really a pity because obviously that's the one we're supposed to use in real documents when we want to represent that thingy here. I was one told off by Andrzej Tomaszewski for not using the proper sign in one of my slides. So you want to do it right, otherwise he yells at you. And so that's the character that poses an issue, and the issue is that in, so which is it? In the XeTeX format, so that's the way they're done in the distribution. Of course, you might rebuild your formats, but when you don't, the default formats in XeTeX, that character doesn't have an LC code, and if it doesn't have an LC code, it means that TeX won't hyphenate at all. Whereas in the LuaTeX default format it does, and that means that XeTeX and LuaTeX hyphenate things differently. So again, a rather minor issue, but it's still something that's completely unnecessary. I mean, it's absolutely not necessary to have that difference in XeTeX and LuaTeX. There are huge differences, major differences in the two engines. These one, I think are really continuing. So the fourth and last point of these technical details is actually much more fun. There is a mechanism in XeTeX called interchar talks, with which you can first define character classes for all the different characters, the unit characters, and then instruct XeTeX. So for example, you would define class 1 as being characters of the Latin alphabet, class 2 Chinese characters. And you could instruct XeTeX that each time it encounters the boundary between character of class 1 and character of class 2, it does something special. So for example, if you don't want to do the font switches yourself, you can tell XeTeX to do it automatically each time it sees a boundary between character of one class and characters of another class. You can also do it in between two characters at the same time. You can do whatever you want. This is something that is used, at least for French, in Polyglossia, because French has that feature that for all the so-called double punctuation signs, you have to put a little space before it. So that includes the colon I just saw, the semicolon, a couple of others, exclamation mark, question mark. And obviously we want TeX to do that automatically. So we use that mechanism in XeTeX, and obviously it's not implemented in LuaTeX. However, LuaTeX does provide the callback you want because it has a callback for doing things in between tokens, the tokens that TeX sees. And you might want to do that to replicate exactly the way XeTeX interchar token mechanism works. However, I don't think that's a good idea at all. I still tried to do it when I started porting Polyglossia to LuaTeX because it seemed fun. But generally it's a big disaster because the thing is, there is no reason why you would interact with the flow of things that TeX sees. I mean, there is no reason why you would do that so close to the input of TeX. It's much more reasonable to do it at the node level once TeX is processing node. And obviously LuaTeX also provides a callback to play with nodes. So in that case, what Eli actually did, the person who helped me, for Polyglossia to LuaTeX. In LuaTeX, we actually don't use an inter-token mechanism. We do it at the node level. So whenever we see a node with any letter followed by the node for the colon, for example, we just put it a small space here. Whatever the width is supposed to be. So this is used in French. I'm pretty sure this is used in another language as well, but I can't remember. So I won't tell you. So, not addressed yet. That's a funny part. So hence, yeah, the lamentation, obviously. Not addressed yet are so-called bidirectional typesetting, which is essential for, actually formally all languages might do bidirectional. The reason we use that name is that for those languages that are typeset right to left, obviously Arabic and Hebrew to start with, and Persian, etc. Because text is done the way it is, you always end up doing things in both directions. So for example, if you have your main text in Persian and a little bit of math in the middle, you really have to mix up directions. So these bidi issues, well, formally they should be, I mean, you might have the problem in any language. If you typeset your text in Polish with a little bit of Arabic in the middle, then you have a problem in the reverse. but most of the time the users who actually care about that are the ones from the right to the left languages. So the big issue is, and I still have no idea what it will look like in the end, is that there is a package called bidi.st. It does work pretty well for the XeTeX. It supports quite a lot of things. It actually goes to great length in order to do all that support. So for example, I know the author does a lot of complicated things for footnotes because, well, obviously if you have the text here in English and you have a footnote, you would have this small rule here and then the text running here. However, everything is in Arabic. So the main text, the body text starts here, and then you need to have the footnote rule here, and a number of other things that are reversed. So it is quite a lot of work. Again, it worked for XeTeX, and obviously the issue is how to make it work for LuaTeX, because it basically doesn't support LuaTeX at all. So I'm not sure what to do at the moment. One temptation is simply to do, sorry guys, it doesn't work. The other thing is that the same person who started bidi a couple of years ago actually tried to do something for LuaTeX and bidi. He started a package called LuaBidi, but for some reason, not only did he stop work very early, and that's fine, of course, there's no, I mean, he shouldn't be compelled to work on it, but now he's removed it too from all the different sources that were done in it. It's an almost political issue, I think. I'm really not sure what to do. The other issue, and this is a really amusing one, is index scripts, which is one of the huge differences between XeTeX and LuaTeX, because most of the people in this room will probably know it, but I find it's necessary to repeat it. One of the huge differences between XeTeX and LuaTeX is that XeTeX implements as much as it can using external libraries, and that means in particular what is called the open type shaping engine, meaning when you have a font, you obviously, an open type font, you obviously need to be able to analyze the format, to parse the format. That's something that both XeTeX and LuaTeX do. However, what XeTeX does that LuaTeX doesn't is that it uses all the information in the font to put the correct glyphs in the document. LuaTeX uses external libraries, from different projects to do that. Sorry, did I say LuaTeX? XeTeX uses third-party libraries. LuaTeX actually expects you to do everything at the macro level. So you need to write your code in Lua and then use callbacks to input that back into the flow of glyphs that text sets. So they said, for example, that it means that quite a lot of work needs to be done in LuaTeX for Arabic, so that exists. While mainly all the open type supporting things of LuaTeX are done by hands in context. And the way it works in LaTeX is that you have an adaptation of that context code to LaTeX. So most of the things you can do with LuaTeX in context you can nowadays do with LaTeX, but the things you can't, including in the scripts, I mean, you can't neither in context nor in LaTeX, obviously. However, newsflash. Apparently, context has experimental support for Devanagari, which is one of the good things about preparing new slides at the very last moment. I actually added that slide when Hans was talking just earlier. Context. So Devanagari is the name. It means, I think, the city of gods in Sanskrit. The name of the script. So it's a script used for Hindi, Marathi, amongst other living languages, and it's also the most widely used script for Sanskrit. It's not by far the only one, but I think it's pretty fair to say that it's the most widely used for Sanskrit, so it's very important if you want to typeset this language, which is still pretty much used in India as a religious language, I guess. So my last comment is maybe not very fair, because I wrote that it's maybe the most important of the 10 scripts used in India and Sri Lanka. There are 10 different but related writing systems over India and Sri Lanka. Devanagari is definitely the most widely used, so probably the most important numbers. I'm pretty sure many Tamil would yell at me for saying that it's the most important one in India. But anyway, that's progress, which is always good. I'm wondering what the next slide is.
Go on.
Oh yeah, future plans. So now you have the name of another prophet just to stick, to the naming scheme. So we always have future plans. So there's one about fixing bugs. So that's a bug in Polyglossia.
Yeah.
And that was actually the code for the French language definition file.
What kind of bug it is?
Well, it's a locust. That's why there's Aaron here. So the plague of Egypt and
The real bug.
The real bug.
Yeah, it was an actual bug.
But it's very difficult.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can see.
Always try to spot the bug.
Yeah, exactly. Actually,
That's the feature of a bug.
That's the best one I had of it. So, yeah. So, this particular bug went away eventually of its own volition. I'm pretty sure that this here is a real bug in Polyglossia, because clearly I simply use the figure environment, the floating environment, and I think that should say figure 1. I don't know why Polyglossia fucks up.
Read the source.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I just realized, again, I'm prepared at the last moment, I just realized it like 1 hour ago. And I thought, oh, that's an actual bug, that was just, an insect. So.
It's some interaction with Beamer, no?
Sorry?
Beamer class.
Yeah,
Does
probably.
something with these numbers.
I'm not looking forward to fixing this one.
I think Beamer thinks you are not supposed to use floats in a slide.
Yeah, it's probably right. Well, I knew it this moment I started writing a begin figure, but... So...
Well, actually, if it's one figure in your slides, then it's okay, isn't it?
The other fun part is that in that case I actually have the column set correctly. It would be set correctly for French because we have the small space.
Very small space.
And no, this is about the width is supposed to be. Anyway, so now for the big project. Fixing bugs is always an issue, and making sure every small thing works right. So here you have another, prophet of the old system. Jeremiah, I think, was famous for complaining all the time. For some reason. So this seems quite fitting. And again, I'm going back to the Old Testament, but it's always in back and forth. So obviously nowadays that Javier has fortunately, resumed active maintenance of Babel. What I really want to do is to coordinate with Babel, because at the moment, we have a formal agreement that we want to at some point do something together, but for the moment, people contact either me or Javier and
not both of you.
Yeah, well, because we never told them for one, so it's not really their fault. But also because, I think at some point we need to sit down and decide exactly what we want to do. Obviously, when you fix bugs in some language files, in Babel we want to do it in Polyglossia and vice versa. What I really want to do, the second point is mostly the kind of bullshit you see in a lot of projects, but still, what I would like to be able is to tell, at the moment, and before me François, when he started Polyglossia, he took a lot of information he could find. Obviously he had already all the language support files for Babel. He took them all in Polyglossia and adapted them. Then he added the languages he was interested in himself, and then you end up with, I think, 73 different files, and you can't maintain that by yourself. It's ridiculous. And even if it's simple things like this one, I'll go back to that in an instant. But even if it's simple things, if you've got over 70 files, it's 70 different languages really. Sometimes it's only variants of the same language, but still, it's dozens and dozens of languages. I can't maintain, well, as interested as I am in the languages of the world, I can't maintain that by myself. So I really want to be able to find people who are responsible for some languages, presumably native speakers most of the time, but not necessarily. People knowledgeable in these languages, I want to find them and be able, okay, now you take care of that file, these several files. And what I'll give you is that, the guarantee that it will be included in every new release in Polyglossia, and you will have, a number of some kind of API, in some kind of interface with which they can use the common macros of Polyglossia. So that's the plan. What I don't want to do is that, and the reason why I just say that is that the correct way to type, the date of today in Spanish would be dos de mayo de 2003. I don't speak Spanish. I think it's 2003, something like that. So you have, all of the day being off, so 2nd of May of 2013, and obviously you don't want tech to break everything. So what someone recently filed a bug report with a Polyglossia a couple of months ago, saying, okay, you're missing the second D in Polyglossia. So very well, obviously I added, no problem at all. But the solution he suggested was to put unbreakable spaces all over the place, which I think is unacceptable at all. But on the other hand, I shouldn't be the one who decides that. It should be, Spanish speakers, people who will actually see that. In that case, I can't remember what I ended up doing, but I think
What does Babel do?
Something else.
So you don't coordinate with Babel then?
No, that's what I say. We don't have.
Yeah, you want to sign now, it should be done the same way, shouldn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, I can't port it to LuaTeX at the same time. That's the trade-off. So at that moment, well, obviously I ended up looking at what Babel did and doing the same. But in that case, I would like the other person to do it. Not me, and probably not Javier either, because even though he is a Spanish speaker, he probably wants to focus on the core. But that's also basically his plan, I think, to just delegate the maintenance of individual language files. And I think that's the only reasonable thing to do. Okay, I've got 10 more minutes, but I'll take 5 for my rambling comments. One ridiculous issue we have is that in Babel, you have a certain number of words, 10 to 15 words defined like figure, table, reference, bibliography, etc. And these are the words that you want to set in the language you're using. The translations of all these words are defined both in Babel and Polyglossia. However, a couple of words, I think actually 3 words, one of them being glossary. So 3 words, including glossary, were added afterwards as an afterthought. And now you end up in both Babel and Polyglossia with all these languages where glossary, the word glossary in English, is either not translated, or because glossary basically means some kind of dictionary, people kept going back and forth between the word for dictionary and the word for glossary in several languages. And I actually got a request for Slovenian to change the word that was glossary, which is a word in the Slovenian dictionary. I checked it, and the person wanted to change it to Slova, meaning dictionary. And obviously that's a very legitimate thing, but it just can't go through me. And the thing is, if different people have different opinions, because that's the issue here.
Curious, where did it come from? From the request?
I'll show you later. I think it's some of the Leaks guys. So I think an American guy developing Leaks, the interface for tech, front end, who contacted a Slovenian speaker who told me, okay, change that. The other funny thing is that in English it's not defined.
You have a problem with French, do you?
It's actually not defined neither in French nor in English, which is why I mentioned it.
Don't understand translation of glossary into English?
Yeah, no, the thing is, it's a macro name. You define a certain number of macro name. So I guess what will happen, admittedly I haven't checked it, but I guess what will happen if you do say /glossary, it will start, a new section or something, and it will begin like a new section. So command glossary exists, but it's looking for something that's called a glossary name, and it's not defined in English, so it will generate an error. You know, you need to have these different macros. Each of the different words, bibliography, etc., are actually macros. And you know, Babel and Polyglossia just load the relevant macro names for your language. Yeah, catalog was another issue where François, the original Polyglossia maintainer, tried to be smart, and it was a little bit of a complication to port that from XeTeX to LuaTeX. And again, you know, it's something about one special character in Catalan. I think it should be taken care of by Catalan users, and yeah, who know the language. I mean, I know the basics, but it's not enough. So to end that, I'm pretty happy of how I'm doing with time. So obviously the last book of the Bible is the Revelation. So the Revelation is, I think we need a big language project for tech. I think it existed at some point, and nowadays, I'm sorry, I really should have said later, because Hans is, I'm guessing, doing his things about himself. Sorry, I just said that I think we need a big language project for tech, but let's say for later. Because at the moment, the different parts of the things you need to do for supporting languages are scattered in at least all these packages. So Polyglossia and Bible for the very high level, you know, of choosing different languages, BiDi for those languages types at right to left, and whenever you need to mix directions. Translator is something that comes through with Beamer that enables you to provide translations for different strings. Fontspec is, of course, the famous package for selecting fonts at a rather high level, and you know, doing all the different things you might work with OpenType. LuaTeX does that part of the job that needs to be done for LuaTeX, that XeTeX does at the engine level. XeTeX-aware is the repository of all the hyphenation patterns we have. And I think at this point, and I think it kind of addresses your comment, I can't just, there are some decisions I can't just make in my, by myself. And I think, obviously when I have questions, I ask them to people I think know the answer, and I discuss them. But I really like to see some kind of, you know, generic project being coordinated, because all these packages are now actively maintained, which is great. But I think we need a little bit more, you know, glue to, so that people actually know what is doing, because it's maddening otherwise. And it struck me last week because I was working on Polyglossia. Obviously, Elihu, the person who was helping me with Polyglossia, actually came back to me with a question, and we ended up discussing the relationship between fontspec and LuaTeX, which, you know, I don't work on either of these packages, while Eli works on this one, so that's why he had a question. You know, where do you think I should put things? And I'd really like to see, and I'm ready to start the effort. I really like to see. It's of course at the developers level, but I think now we have enough developers working actively on different parts of this system. We have enough people that it makes sense to create some kind of group effort, and not just individual working. So that's basically it.
Questions? Comments?
Yeah, I have a question about that. What do you consider a group? I mean, like a mailing list?
I think at the moment a mailing list. But I really think that the different discussions like the discussions you and I have been having for years about hyphenation patterns, I really think they should just go on a public mailing list with archives. Otherwise it's just going to be individual.
Could be benevolent dictator for life.
Sorry?
You could be a benevolent dictator for life.
Yeah, I'll...
saying glossary means in French, whatever.
But the thing is, these decisions, I mean, obviously not everything has to be done in the open. I'm not suggesting that. I mean, if people want to just...
The Babel people didn't do it. These things, this sort of things, when they developed Babel, they sort of took decisions and probably got in corrections afterwards.
Yeah, and to some extent it's fine. Also because you know what they say about committees. I don't propose to create a committee of things that we're discussing. I'm just suggesting that the people who already work on that should maybe be a little bit more open. And obviously there is a fine line. You know, you can't request that every discussion be held in the open. people won't do that.
Yeah.
Be it only because I want to say, oh, this guy is really an asshole, he didn't reply to my question.
Yes,
Could you explain in what ways Polyglossia is different than Babel, or what has had to be adapted for the Americans?
At this point, it's really not that much different. So, you know, one of the next steps could be actually to really merge them. So sorry, to get back to your initial question. One of the things, I think really the main thing that Babel really sucked at was that for most languages, really, say all languages but the ones of Western Europe, it forces a particular font encoding, you know, in 8-bit tech parlance. It says, so for example, for Russian, you would say use the LCY encoding for Cyrillic, blah, blah, blah. I think even for Polish, I mean, I know you're developing the Polish package, but for many languages, or Hebrew, for example, you would just say, okay, we need one particular font with that encoding. With the XeTeX, that's not acceptable at all. First of all, because you don't even have font encoding, you know the font sense. So that was really the main thing. I would like to say that actually Polyglossia, I know when François created it, and it's still doing that, Polyglossia, you know, Babel really imposed a set of font. Polyglossia lifted that restriction by imposing a different script. A particular script, which for most languages is okay because you're only writing it in one writing system. For some languages, it's obviously not okay, as I mentioned, for Sanskrit, which can be rewritten by any number of up to 15 different languages. And I actually had the issue six months ago, I think, on the list of someone who said, I'm typesetting Sanskrit in, I don't know, Bengali or some script, and I'm not really happy with Polyglossia forcing me to choose the Devanagari script. So that would be another effort too.
You happy with the answer? More comments? Helpers? Raise your hands.
I think people are respond.
Yeah, for those things, yeah, for this big project. No helpers, no volunteers. Okay, thank you very much.